What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And this one wants to break down what's going on with NIO stock and why NIO just ended up breaking some critical support as we're seeing this sell-off for many Chinese tickers. I'm also going to talk about some big news involving China that just came out that's leading to this sell-off, and also why on earth we need to see NIO try to base as soon as possible for this thing to have hope for a bounce. But before I do anything like this, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm personally not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, in just about 7 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with NIO and the overall market. So when it comes to NIO, unfortunately, NIO is starting to drop down, and despite the fact that we had this potential inverse head and shoulders that was developing, so far NIO is starting to break down and it could get closer to invalidating it. Now, it's very unfortunate that this is happening, and the 4-hour is starting to look a little bit more bearish as NIO is showing some signs of weakness, but a lot of this had to do with some macroeconomic conditions that were outside of NIO's control. First off, we had some negative data coming out from the initial jobless claims being lower than expected. This basically may incentivize the Fed to be more hawkish, which is what caused the market to gap down. That played a big role in that potentially happening. And also, this other piece of news right here, as China has banned the iPhone use by governmental employees. And this is some big news as well, leading to some more tensions between the US and China. It's also leading to more and more talk about how these restrictions could affect Apple very negatively. So, this caused Apple to get a sell off and basically like gap down really hard for making an attempt to bounce intraday. And that gap down ended up having a very negative effect on NIO. So that ended up affecting NIO, not to mention the fact that there were other pieces of news with the Chinese stocks and some weaker Chinese economic data over the last couple of days. But despite this news, there are some things I just wanted to mention. William Lee Bin did attend the 5th edition of the World New Energy Vehicle Conference in Munich, and this had a live audience with many global leaders in the automotive industry. He was there to talk about NIO's developments globally and why on earth NIO has lots of projected growth. So this was good news for them. Once again, they're continuing to grow. And the thing about NIO is they are showing some very, very big improvements in deliveries. There are some hard, difficulties coming up in their margins, but I'm still optimistic for the future of this company, especially for the long term. I still believe this company has a very, very good chance. Now, when it comes to NIO selling off, it was just part of a broad problem involving China. And also, we started to see more data since Chinese exports ended up falling again in August. That had a big effect on the macroeconomic conditions, leading to more fears about slowdowns in demand in China and some recessionary-like environments. That in turn is hurting NIO. Despite the drop just 2 days ago, Deutsche Bank came out and they're saying you should be buying NIO because they're very bullish for the longer term, and they have some bullish price targets as well. Now, the price price ratio is still down here, meaning NIO has some relative weakness. And Fridays have a tendency of being green about 53% of the time, so not really much from there. I just want to add that we saw an increase in the short interest, about 14 million NIO shares shorted, and 43 million was the volume, a little bit below average. So, with all this data coming out, very, very interesting stuff. NIO is still looking relatively weak. If you look at this, the MACD is still wide open on the 4-hour time frame and it's still starting to look more bearish, unfortunately. Now, I was hoping that we'd have this like inverse head and shoulders, some decent stuff, but we got some negative news involving Apple, not to mention China, and this is having a big effect on NIO. NIO is starting to look more and more like this larger head and shoulders is playing out. So let me just zoom out a little bit and show you. And it's making the share price look a little bit lower and weaker than before. For that reason, if this thing doesn't get a bounce, if it doesn't break below 10.35 tomorrow, if it doesn't start to push up to fill this gap at 10.5 and it continues to downtrend, the next target is going to be bringing this thing all the way down to about 9.5, unfortunately. That is very possible for NIO, and there are also lower levels below that. So we have this like head and shoulders that's developing. There's a chance NIO is going to come all the way down to 9.5 if that fails us. There's a gap down in the 8s that could get filled as we have this negative news for China, not to mention the bad news involving Apple. There's a risk of NIO coming down. The question is, will NIO try to bounce with the market and then come down, or will it just continue dropping? It still looks more bearish overall now that we got this drop, and now that it's looking like it's getting closer to invalidating this inverse head and shoulders. Let me first talk about the market real quick. So for SPY, even though SPY has dropped, it established a higher low relative to before, and we have this bullish divergence that has developed on it. You can see this higher low was established relative to this one, and with this bullish divergence potentially playing out, there's a chance we're going to see this thing try to rebound. 445 is max pain for tomorrow, so I might try to push up tomorrow, maybe slow down intraday as the day goes on. I think we're going to get a pump and dump kind of day, but the dump isn't going to be that bad, and we should still get a green day with a close around 445. But I think we're going to pump up, try to fill this imbalance to like 447. We might see a little pop, then a drop as time goes on, and I think we're going to get a bounce. Part of why I'm saying that is because of Aapl. Aapl has a potential inverse head and shoulders developing. And we have this unfilled gap around this 182 zone. There's also that's from the pre-market. For the open, there's a gap at 181. I think Aapl may make an attempt to fill it. We could see Aapl break above 180, which could push the market up a little bit. The QQQ could push up too. We could push up to fill 375 first before any potential rejections, but there's a good chance it's going to try to remain bullish alongside SPY, Aapl, and Nvda, and all these different stocks. Nvda also looks more bullish. You can see we got this nice balance right over here with the inverse head and shoulders. Going to be looking for this gap fill around this 470 area as soon as tomorrow, if not by Monday. I think that's very, very probable. It may gap down right around this like 458 area and then try to bounce and start pushing. I find that very, very probable. Last but not least, for Tesla, Tesla's looking strong. Very, very nice bounce, nice push up. I'm going to be watching this imbalance. I think 255 is the target. Might gap down tomorrow, retest like this lower level, like right here. I would say like 247 to 250, then break out and start pushing for 255. Slow down at the very end of the day, but still close green for Tesla. That's what I'm seeing for Tesla. For NIO, how are things looking? As of right now, it's still looking weak. It came into very oversold territory, tried to bounce a little bit, but the overall trend is still looking weak on NIO now, and going to be looking for maybe a gap up tomorrow, a retest of like 10.25, then a rejection, and might just start to cool off. If NIO fails to break some critical levels, we could see this thing just continue to remain weak. The overall trend looks more bearish now that got this drop and started to invalidate this inverse head and shoulders. So we might get a retest of like 10.25, then a rejection, and a drop all the way back down to the nines. Looks more bearish. This looks like a head and shoulders that's developing. It's unfortunate, but I'm going to be looking for a gap up, a little pop to 10.25 or so before it continues to sink. If NIO ends up holding above this zone right here at like 10.25, we hold it, then we could see it try to fill the gap around 10.5 and then reject. That's another possibility. So I'm seeing 10.25 to 10.5 being tested, then a rejection and NIO cooling off. Not looking the best on the bigger trends, but I'm still hoping for a little pop in the morning before a potential drop. That is my prediction for NIO. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day. NIO to the moon because the long term is still very bright despite the short term fluctuations. And peace